It is my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Professor Denis Aheto. As Dave mentioned, he is a professor of coastal ecology and interdisciplinary ocean studies at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. He also served as director for the Center for Coastal Management and the World Bank Africa Center of Excellence in Coastal Resilience. Additionally, he also has a connection to Canada. He holds an adjunct professorship at the University of Waterloo. Dennis' research interests span a broad range of topics, including fisheries governance, climate change adaptations, and social resilience in coastal economies. I have the privilege of collaborating with Dennis through the Solving FCB Partnership Project, in which he is one of the principal investigators, particularly for the West Africa case study. In addition, we are also working together in the selections of the African UBC Visiting Fellow Program, which we have now selected the fellows for this year, and we will be announcing it soon, so stay tuned. Last year, I got to visit Ghana as part of the FCB project, and Dennis has kindly hosted me in University of Cape Coast. I participated particularly in the inaugural ceremony of Dennis' promotion and tenure, which is a wonderful celebration where he delivered an inspiring lecture. It was during that time that I had the opportunity to get to know Dennis and his impressive career development more deeply. I think Dennis will share his wisdom through his career developments in his talk, and I really look forward to that. Dennis holds a degree from the University of Cape Coast, the British Agriculture University, and the University of Bremen, where he completed his PhD in environmental science. He has published many papers and reports, and he is particularly known for his transformative leadership in coastal and marine conservation sectors. He has successfully managed over 40 projects with multi-million dollars in funding and covering topics from coastal zone management, blue economy, and ocean governance. He also received various awards, including the Waterbean Professorship of Environment from the University of Waterloo and the Osa Barima Royal Award of Transformative Leadership in 2024. So without further ado, I will pass the floor to Dennis for giving us the presentation. Thank you, Dennis.
Dennis, can you hear us?
We may have temporarily lost Dennis. He was using some shaky internet. We'll just give it a moment, everyone.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know. I think I had a bit of internet issue, but then I'm coming up again. Sorry.
Okay, excellent. Thank you,
Loading the
Dennis.
slides. Please, do you see the slides?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Right. So I guess I can start now, right?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. Well, it's good evening from this side. I'm currently in Yaoundé in Cameroon on a research activity, but due to go back to Ghana tomorrow. It's a great opportunity for me to interact with you on this topic of how we working to promote research excellence for impact in marine conservation in Africa. We focus on ISCO. Within the context of this topic, there's really a lot to talk about, but in the interest of time, I've decided to make it quite conversational and non-technical in our approach, just to discuss with you some of the critical issues that we focus on within the center, and also to, as it were, highlight some of the important areas where, as a center, we try to focus on in order to achieve excellence for impact within Ghana and within the region. So we do know that, oops, what's happening? The slides are not moving. Let me see what's going on.
Dennis, do you want me to control the slides?
Yeah,
from
maybe
here?
you can. Yes, you may want to do that. I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
But when we tried it, it was working perfectly. So I don't know. Yeah, I think it's working now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
working.
so, right. So Africa has 38 of the coastal states out of the 54 countries. So you can imagine that it's quite a significant area we're talking about, involving about 13 million square of ocean space, with approximately 48,000 kilometers of coastline. That actually makes it that the continent is very rich in natural resources and biodiversity. Unfortunately, there are significant ocean conservation challenges that are complex and very diverse, depending on what you are looking at or what the issue you are looking at. So with your permission, I would like to just highlight some of the few issues in terms of challenges from the ecological aspect, from the ecological challenges. We do have issues of overfishing and destructive fishing practices resulting from distant water fleets and IUU fishing. Of course, that is not to say that there are issues with small-scale fisheries, fishing with illegal measures, including use of small mesh nets, some of the challenges facing small-scale fisheries, including the use of chemicals by small-scale artisanal fishers. There are also issues of marine pollution. We all know the issues of the challenges of plastics, oil, chemical, and industrial waste that get into the ocean. There are challenges also from an ecological perspective, the issues of habitat destruction of mangroves, coral reefs, and also seagrass beds. Climate change and introduction of invasive species are all part of the challenges. On the socioeconomic front, challenges has to do with food security and livelihood issues, especially for those who depend on small-scale fisheries or fisheries. And so with declining fish stocks, that is a problem, entrenching poverty. And the situation also has been that there are limited economic alternatives. A greater part of the problem also has to do with, yeah, I'm speaking to these slides in particular. I will soon move on the slides. So a greater part of the problem also has to do with limited access to education, training, and capacity building. The reason I'm highlighting this because one of the critical issues here is that when it comes to ocean-related topics, many Africans or young African students are not interested in studying this area because it's so much associated with poverty. Unlike in the developed world, we see that around the ocean environment, these are really well-planned and well-developed areas that are highly prized, highly valued areas. But in many developing countries, particularly in Africa, the ocean seafront environment or the coastal environment are so much associated with poverty because of lack of or inadequate planning of those spaces. Yeah, so on the socioeconomic front, there are also human and wildlife conflicts, fisheries versus marine protected areas. Significantly also, there are challenges to do with governance, weak institutional frameworks, limited enforcement, and monitoring capability, and then the issue of transparency, lack of transparency, corruption, and inadequate international cooperation. So the issues are quite enormous. In the interest of this presentation, the departure is really how we promote research to provide data that supports decision-making within the region. But part of the problem also in terms of providing research, which we call the research excellence, also has to do with limited funding opportunities. Now, placing this into context, when we refer to research as excellence, or within the context of this talk, particularly, we're looking at originality and innovation. We're also looking at its relevance to societal needs. More often than not, as academics, what we do is sit within our offices in front of our computers and come up with research topics that are not really relevant to society. Research excellence really focuses on demand-driven aspects of research that makes the output relevant for society. Aspects of it also has to do with knowledge transfer or knowledge translation to industry for use, for benefit of the greater good of society, interdisciplinarity and cooperation, working with different academics or research experts with different academic background, diversified backgrounds, are quite critical when it comes to research excellence. And of course, communicating and disseminating research results, not through only research publications, but through policy papers and some engagement with policy and industry are critical. Central to this is adherence to ethical standards and integrity. Essential components in terms of indicators has to do with publication in top-tier journals, research funding and grants, which is central, citation metrics, awards and recognitions, which really highlights the essence of excellence in research, collaborating with globally renowned researchers. And of course, I've mentioned and highlighted the importance of policy practice and outreach, including the involvement of local communities, are central indicators to highlight what research excellence is all about. Some of the factors that contribute to research excellence has to do with investigator expertise and experience. It's important to also underscore the relevance of institutional support at the highest level of management, which is critical. And oftentimes this could be a problem if it's not handled properly, and could be a major challenge when it comes to promoting research excellence. Having access to cutting-edge infrastructure and technologies are critical to promote research excellence. And then also making sure that there are some entrepreneurial components in terms of promoting the employability of the graduates or beneficiaries of research. We also look at the essence of professional development and training, which is central because as a research institution, one of the critical elements is to promote research capacity development, continuous professional development among the staff. All these are essentially very critical when it comes to that. The benefits that come out of research excellence are enumerated. I mean, this is by no means an exclusive list. There are other benefits which I believe you are all aware of. Excellent research advances knowledge and understanding. In order to achieve that, you also need to attract top talents, and eventually that also brings spin-offs, beneficial spin-offs in research funding. It improves policy and practice and enhances societal well-being, fosters international cooperation and collaboration, and then, of course, increases institutional reputation and prestige, provides evidence base for decision-making. Part of the challenges, you see that the areas that I've highlighted really underscores the fact that it demands a lot in order to achieve excellence in research. It's quite demanding. One of the greatest challenges has to do with limited funding, particularly within the African context and resources. And the challenges also to manage research collaborations, because as I mentioned earlier, if you want to achieve excellence in research, you can't do it alone. There must be interdisciplinarity Part of it is also to secure research partnerships outside your university or even globally. And it demands quite a lot of management aspects of it that needs to be considered. Part of the challenge is also increasing competition within universities for limited resources, even if you have to attract grants outside your domain. And then the evolving complexity in interdisciplinary research and getting to know each other and advance the course of research from the different backgrounds is a critical issue. And many other areas, including maintaining a culture of excellence and innovation, even within the context of all these challenges. Permit me to discuss with you a few challenges or issues when it comes to African government spending on research. Generally, African Union member states support research to a very limited extent. In 2006, 2007, African Union member countries committed less than 1% of GDP on research and development. But this amount hasn't been far-fetched. No country in Africa has been able to fulfill that commitment. In just last year, Africa was the region with the lowest domestic spending on funding when it comes to support for research on the continent. If you take countries across the region, some selected countries, you see that averagely across the continent, R&D, average African government support for R&D expenditure was just about 0.45%, less than 0.5% of global average GDP, which was quite a problem, you know, and the situation hasn't really changed. If you look at the statistics for South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, Morocco, they also range within less than 1% of GDP. So it's certainly a very big problem. A commitment to research funding has not been the best within the African context. There has been calls for governments to step up research funding in higher education institutions, as it were, to build the needed capacity within the hard and soft sciences. However, literature has also shown that there's limited scholarship on research funding across the continent, and this is actually backed by literature. There's low investment by African governments on R&D and over-reliance on foreign funding. You know, external funding concentrated in East Africa. However, within West Africa, Ghana is one country that has shown a lot of promise when it comes to funding. You know, so priority areas have been limited within the African educational landscape for most of the subject areas, except for agriculture and health that have received quite some significant funding in research. So it's really a very big problem, especially if you want to assess funding and do quite some very good research that meets excellent standards to promote societal well-being. In the interest of time, I will just skip this slide. But one of the critical message that this slide is seeking to mention is the fact that in order to conduct serious and advanced research that can be benchmarked as an excellent work, it has literally become the issue to seek for external funding. But that also requires quite a lot of work in order to secure partnerships globally, in order to beef up the needed capacity to be able to win grants and to do the kind of research that it demands by the sponsors. So it's certainly a very critical issue, and in many cases, even when you write the grants, it's not really clear or unpredictable whether one can also win such grants. Yeah, So what we have focused on over the past 10 years at the University of Cape Coast is to look at some kind of strategic planning. We first of all started by establishing a center, which at the time was meant to train a critical mass of students and professionals in the area of fisheries governance, coastal management, coastal resilience, and related topics. What we did was that we approached the university and made it known to them of our interest to establish such a center with a vision to become a center of excellence. And the idea was to promote increasing the quantity and quality of our students within that space, mainly postgraduate students. And then, of course, we train them to be highly skilled, to apply their research for development. We also linked up with industry, many industries within the sector within Ghana. As I mentioned, the issue was to become a center of excellence, which was one of the things that we had planned right from the onset, and to build the needed funding portfolio. The university at the time made it known to us that it did not have the resources. And so it was up to us to, talking about myself and colleagues, to really sit up and then see what we could do within that context. And so what we did was that the center was established, and primarily with the aim of building future leaders for Africa's emerging economy. We started with we were successful with an initial grant of about $5.5 million from the USAID, which enabled us to put up quite some important research infrastructure in terms of a laboratory, and then, of course, helped us to develop strategic plans to be able to advance the course of the vision in terms of developing academic programs in a number of areas, in fisheries, in coastal management, in oceanography, and then also in aquaculture. And then also we developed other critical short courses, which were just 5-day courses around these particular subjects. The other thing that we did was to develop research thematic areas, 5 different research thematic areas in the area of blue economy, focusing on biodiversity, which looks not just at fisheries, but mangroves and other kinds of coastal and marine biodiversity. We focused also on climate change and adaptation. We also looked at coastal geomorphology issues due to issues of climate change and adaptation related mitigation issues. And then, of course, migration and some other particular areas. Significantly, over time, we beefed up our capacity in grantsmanship. And as it were, we're lucky that in 2018, we competitively a grant that enabled us to establish a very high-level platform to scale up coastal resilience research within the continent, particularly starting from West Africa. And so the platform that we have now cuts across knowledge, finance, and policy outreach. So in terms of the knowledge, we are currently serving as the World Bank supported or partnership arrangement with the World Bank and the Association of African Universities to build the capacity of several young African students. Over the past 5 years, we have trained about 30 PhDs and also over 100 students in master degree holders. The process is also that we use the platform to secure funding, and so we've been able to, over the period, raised close to over $20 million, which has helped us to identify important projects within the coastal resilience investment portfolio. We have also developed very strong partnership or leadership buy-in in countries across the region where we are promoting discussions around the issue of blue economy and resilience, addressing the challenges of pollution, climate change, and many other areas that relate to coastal degradation, coastal marine degradation. One of the key factors of success has to do with human resource capacity building. Even within the center, we try to build the capacity of our staff. One of the other critical things that we do is that we secure internship opportunities, what we call professional internship opportunities for our staff in development organizations. So some of our staff have been to the World Bank, the African Union, to Ocean Country Partnership Programs in the UK, and many other institutions, including the FAO. And this, in a way, has also beefed up their knowledge in terms of development work. And whilst there, they're also able to share some of the activities that we embark on, which has brought about quite some significant impact on the work of the center. I've already touched on the issue of funding, but essentially we do not receive funding from within the university or within Ghana. So we actively write project proposals and of course also partner with other government and civil society institutions as well as policy agents in grantsmanship. Over the period, and currently, we have about 36 different projects in across the continent, covering issues of marine spatial planning, policy engagement, issues of distant water fleets, and many other areas. So essentially, partnerships have been a critical part of our programs. In terms of our regional footprint for postgraduate education in particular, we have students currently from 17 African countries, and we have trained not less than 400 professionals within that space. So this is just a quick overview of what we do at the center. I've decided to share just some highlights of what we do at the center so that during the question time, I can be more specific on the issues. You're also free to visit our website to see the kind of things that we do. We are partnering with UBC and some other universities in Canada and elsewhere, the United States, and within the continent. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for your presentation and your overview. We're going to open up for questions, but I'm going to start with one. I guess it's an observation, but I guess I'll put a question at the end. You mentioned at the beginning that, the coastal African states, there's 38 coastal African states.
Yes.
Which is a huge number. I mean, it's 50% more than the EU. And there's a tremendous diversity within that 38. So how much of a challenge is it for any particular program of trying to get some sort of unity or agreement across the region as opposed to just, within your center?
Yeah, first of all, I must acknowledge that we are not the only academic institution dealing with marine and coastal issues. But just to clarify that, before answering your question, I'd like to clarify the point that the governments of the continent, are collaborating with the World Bank through a loan agreement to build capacities of Africans. It's not just in the marine field. It cuts across different thematic academic disciplines. The whole idea is that significantly, many young Africans go to Canada or the US or to Europe or Asia for their postgraduate training at a very huge cost. Part of it is that they don't even get to come back to the continent. So this program seeks to promote the training of Africans within the continent, working with various partners, and that also enhances their retention once they are completed the program. And then of course also promotes regional collaboration and so on. And so that is one of the issues. But back to the question that you raised, there are regions, even though it's a continent made up of all these 38 coastal states, we should also acknowledge that there are region-specific challenges. So it is not that easy to have a one-stop shop or one-fit approach in addressing the issues to do with the maritime degradation or maritime enforcement. So, for instance, in West Africa, most of the challenges border around overfishing and IUU fishing in particular, and coastal erosion. Whereas if you go to East Africa, you're facing issues of coral reef degradation, marine pollution, and coastal development because of the issues of tourism and so on and so forth. In Southern Africa, we are aware of the oil and gas exploration and fisheries management issues and the need for the creation of marine protected areas. And of course, within the small island developing nations, Madagascar, Seychelles, Comoros, Cape Verde, and so on, they also have their unique issues they are dealing with on the basis of their limited resources, impacts of climate change and many other vulnerabilities that they face. So it is not that easy to have a kind of approach that addresses all the issue at a go. So there's the need for regionalization, and that is why there are regional economic communities and plans to help advance how these issues are addressed.
Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you, Dennis. Very interesting. Do we have any questions from the floor for Dennis, or from the Zoom, I guess would be the appropriate, from the Ethernet? Just raise your hand. We've Stephanie, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, hi. Can everyone hear me okay? Sorry.
Stephanie, are you muted?
We can't really hear you, Stephanie. I think your volume's down. Okay, we're gonna temporarily move on to William. William, would you like to ask your question?
Thanks, and thank you so much, Dennis, for sharing your experience and view in supporting marine science and education in Africa. I think my question is a little bit broad. I think there is a lot of value and importance in the perspective, the African perspective, both in terms of the issues that you are facing, as well as your perspective about solutions of solving some of the marine-related challenges in the world. Africa is a big continent, and there is playing a really important role in the ocean systems as well as in fisheries as well. I know you travel a lot, go to a lot of international and regional meetings. What's your perspective about how the center as well as the other initiative can connect Africa to the rest of the world in bringing that perspective to the discussions of marine and conservation and fisheries issues in the world?
That the issues pertaining to marine degradation within the continent or on the continent are diverse, as I've already mentioned. And so there must be different levels of interventions at the regional level, at the country level, at the states, level, the regional, what I mean is within the countries, the provinces, and also at the community levels. But I think what I have observed largely also has to do with the fact that the domestication of some of these international regional environmental instruments pertaining to the marine environment does not really trickle down, and essentially the issues of marine environment are also not prioritized because of multiple challenges that the countries are faced with. So, for instance, the politics of the countries have to really look at which aspects of development in the country they need to look at. So they have to share the national cake, either focusing on education or on the environment or some other consideration, or even poverty alleviation. So my perspective really is that we need to continue to sensitize the people, because at the end of the day, they don't really also understand, even at the policy level, what the issues are. Part of it also has to do with lack of data availability, inadequate policies, inadequate capacities, and inadequate knowledge on the overall extent of the impacts that we face, be it climate change or pollution and so on and so forth. So there is a need for a lot of work in this sector at the policy level, where we try to get the regulations in place. Issues of enforcement need to be enhanced, capacity development, and then also the need to put in place the needed enforcement regimes to implement the regulations.
Thanks, Dennis. We have some questions online. One of the is, what are sort of your top goals or aspirations for the center moving forwards? Sorry, Dennis, did you hear that? Did anyone hear? Am I offline? Okay, thank you, Sarah.
An institute, we are already a regional center, but that's not.
Oh, Dennis, you're cutting out, I'm afraid.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Do you want to try
Yes.
repeating your answer? We look at a little bit
Yeah,
of it.
so the top goal of our center is to become an ocean institute for the sub-region, where we have an expanded mandate to step up our training, including providing some online platforms for capacity development. Part of the top goals is also to be able to train the next generation of scientists who could work as technocrats within the sub-region, and to advocate for more capacity development on the continent. Because as I did indicate, once we are able to train students on the continent, they understand the issues, they are able to, in terms of retention, decreases the brain drain and all that. So we are focusing on that for now as one of our major goals.
Thanks. Another question somebody asked is, what past research collaborations has the center had with this center, with the IOF, and how can we encourage, or what areas would you like to see us become more involved between the IOF center and your center?
Right, yes. So IOF, Food Climate and Biodiversity, this is a 7-year project with more than 90 global scientists. And the idea is to really envision the future in terms of how food, climate, and biodiversity nexus can be better connected. Because we do know that without that effective, sustainable connection between these three, there certainly will be a big problem. So we are looking at that. We also do have other initiatives that are ongoing, the vulnerability to viability project in fisheries, where we are looking at how we can transition from vulnerable coastal communities and make the practices more viable. So these are two key areas. But then, of course, we have also received Daniel Pauly at our center the beginning of this year, where he came on sabbatical and contributed significantly to some of the research activities. We have ongoing collaborations with other faculty members within IOF. William is one of them. and we are excited about the opportunities moving forward.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that a great deal of your funding has traditionally come from, private funders or organizations, global organizations. And what is the approach, or how do you ensure that they're not setting the agenda, that it's coming from within the center?
Yeah, that's a very important question. What we try to advocate for is to co-create, and more often we are kind of fortunate because in lately most of the funding demands actually requires for some co-creation, some inception activities that allows for input from local partners. Even though once you are getting the money from outside, they have their own kind of demands, but we try as much as possible to make sure that it aligns with our development goals as a country. One of the critical things that we look out for is to involve the policymakers, because at the end of the research, definitely you need to discuss the outcomes and deliverables with the policymakers or governments for implementation. So we try to make sure that it aligns with the country's development priorities as much as possible. Securing research permits, making sure that we follow the right ethical procedures and so on. I did forget to also mention our expanding interest in within UBC. Quite recently, we secured a joint funding under the NFRF, New Frontiers Research Fund, with Professor Terry Sunderland. And we're also looking at research across East and West Africa on mangrove systems, which obviously would also support issues of climate change adaptation, livelihoods improvement, and carbon stock management.
Okay. And finally, just looking back, as final question, perhaps looking back at what you have accomplished, what is a particular innovation or solution or approach that you're particularly proud of that's emerged from the center over the past 10 years or so?
Well, one critical innovation that I'm particularly proud of has to do with the highlighting of women shellfishers in West Africa. Shell fisheries is one of the hidden fisheries within the continent, and we've been able to conduct an 11-country assessment of the importance of shell fisheries to the local economy and women, and improvement of lives of women, and to the extent that we've been able to develop a regional hub involving all these countries that is highlighting the necessity for coastal conservation through mangrove resources, effective mangrove resource utilization, supporting women in securing their livelihoods through oyster culture. So that is one of the areas that I would like to highlight. And of course, working closely with the African Union in defining policies and capacity building for the blue economy agenda for the continent. These are two areas that I would like to mention.